Welcome to Electric Bike Report. My name is John. Some highlights from this week. Ride1Up released a new eMTB with a really great spec sheet and a price that I think you're going to appreciate. We'll talk more about that later. The next thing is a recall that the CPSC announced, and that is on 24,000 e-bikes that were sold through online retailers like Amazon.com and Walmart's website. And then I'm also going to respond to a bunch of questions and comments from our audience, and we're going to get into a discussion on tires, among many other things. So for answers to those questions, for more information, make sure you stick around for this week's episode of the Weekly Recharge. Jumping right into the news this week, I think you will notice right off the bat that Griffin is not with me today. He is actually enjoying a very well-earned vacation, so let's all wish him a fun and enjoyable time with his family. Second thing, though, I'm not going to make a huge deal out of this, but we did actually finally hit the 100,000 subscriber mark. I'm going to save a bigger celebration for when Griffin is back in the studio here, since it's, our win equally, and I'm very excited to share that with him. But I did want to just make that announcement and thank all of you who have subscribed and participated. And, if you haven't so far done that, then please make sure you hit that subscribe button and help us to continue growing the channel. We really appreciate it. But anyway, getting into the formal news stories this week, let's talk a little bit more about the Ride1Up eMTB. So that is called the Trailrush. And that is a class 3 e-bike so that offers pedal assist up to 28 miles per hour. And it has a Brose mid-drive that's capable of 90 newton meters of torque. So pretty powerful there. That is actually the same mid-drive motor that is on the brand's trekking e-bike, the Prodigy V2, but it's definitely well suited for an eMTB as well. But let's run through kind of the rest of the specs quickly here. So we've got a 504 watt-hour battery with an estimated range of 30 to 50 miles. The bike also has a 10-speed Shimano Deore drivetrain that comes with a clutched derailleur. For a suspension, this is a hardtail eMTB, so we just have the fork up front. That is the RockShox Judy Silver TK. That's an air fork with 120 millimeters of travel. We've also got a dropper post from Exaform that is 150 millimeters. There's a 4-piston hydraulic disc brake system. That is the Tektro Orion brake system. And then we've got 29-inch Maxxis Minion tires that are also tubeless ready, although that is going to require a conversion with tape and valves and that sort of thing. But the bike's price is kind of mind-blowing. It is just under $2,100, $2,095 to be exact. And that's a great price for this bike, for everything that it comes with. We're kind of blown away by the spec sheet here. We have the bike kind of offset actually right now. I'm looking at it, but we've been able to take it out for a few rides. Our review is currently in progress though. So again, make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned for that full review when that goes live. But moving on, we'll talk a little bit more about the recall that the CPSC announced. So again, that's around 24,000 e-bikes and their batteries. The bikes were made from a brand called Vivi or Vivi, not sure on the pronunciation there, but they were sold between December of 2020 and November of 2023. And they were available on a number of websites. So there's Walmart, Wish, Amazon, Wayfair, AliExpress, Sears, eBay, and then the brand's website, which is vvebikes.com. And they were sold for prices that ranged kind of in the range between $360 to $950. So definitely very much in the budget tier. So the CPSC stated that the batteries can actually overheat and catch fire. That's definitely kind of a big deal. There have been 14 incidents of overheating, but only 3 fires, and there have not been any injuries reported. So I was very happy to see that. If you own one of the affected e-bikes, first thing first, stop using it immediately. Do not plug it in. You might actually just want to take the battery out of your bike. So the brand Vivi is offering the ability to get a replacement battery and charger for free, although there are some stipulations for that. So they're actually encouraging you to just dispose of the battery properly, which is going to be through a hazardous waste disposal center. You should be able to find something like that in your area. You can also reach out to them through their toll-free number or their contact form on the recall page. So you do have to get basically proof that the battery was disposed of correctly, but then you can get the battery and charger replacement for free. And just generally speaking about this is a great example of why we have fairly rigorous standards when it comes to bikes that we recommend. in the budget price range. Not saying that brands and bikes that are more costly don't have issues. We actually talked about a recall from Giant ebikes last week. So, that can definitely happen, but, it does seem to be a little bit more prone on bikes that are relatively cheap like this. So, just you kind of get what you pay for. You can definitely trust our recommendations for that entry level tier though. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about some new e-bike laws in California. So the Governor Gavin Newsom signed 2 bills into law that affect an e-bike speed and its visibility. So the visibility law is AB 544 and the speed law is AB 545. Now AB 544 basically adds a little bit to existing CPSC guidelines. Right now, the CPSC requires that all bikes and e-bikes have reflectors on their front, rear, wheels, and pedals. So this law in California now either requires a red reflector on the rear that is visible from up to 500 feet when reflecting light from an automobile's headlights, or you can also have a flashing light just again to add visibility there. And then on the other side, so AB 545, that kind of tightens down on some speed restrictions. We reported recently that California kind of redefined the 3 classes of e-bikes, and basically their changes made it so that bikes cannot be multiple classes at the same time. So, a class 2 e-bike with a throttle that goes up to 20 miles per hour cannot also be a class 3 with pedal assist up to 28. But this new law then basically restricts mobile apps from unlocking an e-bike speed. So, you wouldn't be able to buy a bike at class 2 and then using an app unlock it to class 3 or higher speeds. There was an assemblywoman from California named Lori Davies who made a statement. She said, "With ever-changing technology, these bills allow us to equip e-bikes with new safety lights, plus eliminate the possibility of riders acquiring applications to illegally rig their bikes. Product innovation shouldn't come at the cost of public safety." So our take, I think I've made it clear on a number of occasions that I personally am very much in favor of safety. We as a company are very much in favor of safety. So the visibility law definitely seems reasonable here. And when it comes to speed, we are very much in favor of bikes sticking to the limits of the 3-class system, but that law seems maybe a little bit unnecessary, especially as long as brands are kind of following California's new laws, which, in our experience, most of them seem to be doing. So I guess we'll just kind of see how that shakes out. But then our last story for the week comes to us from the Austin, Texas-based brand called eBliss Global. They are planning to build a factory in New York where they will assemble bikes. So they're actually planning to invest $4.1 million to assemble this, to develop this factory in Utica, New York. And the factory is set to create 40 jobs. It will have the capacity to make up to 100,000 e-bikes annually, although the brand's goal when starting out is just to assemble 15,000, which is still plenty. Definitely a very encouraging piece of news here, just seeing some more production develop. But eBliss is interesting as a company as well. They have a really good team of industry veterans here. So the CEO, whose name is Bill Clem, he is a former CEO of Fallbrook Technologies, and they developed a continuously variable transmission, or CVT, that is called the New Vinci. We've read a lot about that, but I don't think we've had hands-on experience with it yet, but I could be wrong. Before my time, anyway. So the lead designer at the brand, whose name is Tony Ellsworth, he founded his own mountain bike brand that was called Ellsworth Mountain Bikes. And then the vice president, Steve Ritchie, he is a former VP of operations at both Denago and Bike.com. So pretty cool to see there. But anyway, the CEO, Bill Clem, made a statement saying, "This endeavor has been years in the making. This factory represents a significant and crucial step in our mission to build e-bikes in the USA. Utica, Oneida County, and upstate New York have historically been known as a hub of blue-collar industry, and we're thrilled to be a part of its next chapter and to build the green transportation revolution right here in upstate New York." So that factory is going to be built in downtown Utica in a place called Harbor Point, and that area has kind of been recently redeveloped with some commercial areas, apartment buildings, and a promenade. But again, just very encouraging to see this here. There are a couple of other brands that assemble e-bikes here in the U.S., but it is also important to consider that These companies are still importing their components and then just putting them together here. So as long as tariffs remain high, we've talked a lot about tariffs recently, production costs may still be impacted, but this is at least one good step in the road. So anyway, that wraps up this week's news. Let's keep things moving. All right, now's the time where we're going to take a look at some of the gear we've been sent to test out. And as a reminder, this is not a sponsored section of the show. But today, this is really exciting. We've got some very cool products here from Redshift. So we have their shock stop suspension seat post. We actually have two models here that I'll get into the details about. But Redshift makes some really great products. They're kind of, at least I primarily know them for making gravel suspension. They do a nice stem suspension, but this is for your rear end instead of the front. So they're kind of known as just the gold standard for suspension seat posts. There's a couple different types of suspension seat posts out there, with sort of the entry level being sort of a single coil spring suspension, and then in the middle kind of a rocker style, and this is just a higher end rocker style suspension that just feels a little smoother and more natural instead of bouncy and springy. So again, we've got two models here. This is the Shock Stop City, and then we have the Shock Stop Endurance in the box here. Very similar. There are some price differences and spec differences. And then there also are two higher end, more premium models as well that we don't have, but these are good starting places. So the Shock Stop City, this one is intended for e-bikes specifically, and primarily those commuters, city bikes, things that you're gonna ride fairly casually around town. This one is priced at $179. It has 35 millimeters of travel with adjustable stiffness. There's like kind of a dial that you can adjust there, and then a spring that you can swap out depending on your body weight to just either stiffen or soften the ride a little bit more. This one has two diameter options, 30.9 and 31.6 millimeters, and then two length options. Those are 350 and 400 millimeter lengths. And this one is good for riders up to 300 pounds. And then the Shock Stop Endurance that we have in the box here, very similar in appearance. The only real difference that I noticed just right off the bat was just sort of the saddle mount. But that one is priced at $229. It also has 35 millimeters of adjustable travel. It has a wider range of diameters and lengths. So for diameters, there's 27.2 millimeters, 30.4, 30.9, and 31.6 millimeters. And then same thing with lengths. We've got 280, 350, 400, and 450 millimeter lengths. And this one is best for riders up to 264 pounds. Now, if you do have a larger seat tube, both of these are compatible with seat tubes up to 34.9 millimeters in diameter, although you would need to get shims to fit that. They also have a mud guard that you can remove if you're kind of doing more performance style things. So the Endurance model here, this one can basically do all of the same things as the City model, but it is more geared towards, gravel riding, off-roading, that sort of thing. And if you have the mud guard and you're doing some off-roading, that just kind of helps keep your suspension seat post from getting gunked up. But anyway, if these are interesting to you, you can check out the links in the video description there. We have yet to try them out. I'm really excited to throw them on some bikes and get a feel for them. If you want to find out more, again, stay tuned. We'll give you some feedback once we have some more time in the saddle. All right, and now for a little peek behind the curtain, products that we have in testing and things that have gone live. I did mention the Trailrush that's offset right now, so that is something, but we actually haven't received any new bikes for about a week now, which is pretty unusual considering that we've had a lot of things coming in the door over the past couple of months. Just with that in mind, we are very much stacked for the future. We're going to be working through everything a little bit at a time. So if you are interested, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for new reviews. But then we did have one video go live. So that was a review that I did for the Pucky Puppy Labrador Pro, which is a very budget-friendly, full suspension, fat tire e-bike. We had a ton of requests to review that bike, so if that was you, be sure to check that one out. But again, that's it for the peek behind the curtain. Let's now get into some more fun stuff. All right, every week we like to take a look at a cool spot around the country and sometimes the world, a place that has great e-bike infrastructure or a cool e-bike friendly trail. Today we are going to Washington State. I'm kind of continuing and borrowing from Griffin's book here of just kind of trying to find some more information and learn about places that I haven't spent a lot of time in. So today we're talking about the Olympic Discovery Trail that basically crosses the entire Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, and it's about 130 miles long. It caters to cyclists, equestrians, and pedestrians. So it starts in Port Townsend, if I can talk, there we go, on the east side of the peninsula, and it ends on the coast at a town called La Push. So right now the trail is actually still under construction, but there's about 90 miles that are complete. And then if you are trying to kind of ride the whole thing, you might have to cut across some roads just to, make it all work and connect. But there are basically 4 trail regions that it is split into. The first one is called the East End. That one runs 27 miles from the boatyard in Port Townsend, then over to a town called Blinn. I believe I'm saying that correctly. So this one is actually kind of the least developed that I read here. Only 7 miles of the trail is completed and paved, so most of it takes place on roads right now. But along the way, you get some really nice views of the Puget Sound and Discovery Bay. And then, of course, you're riding, through some more, urban developed areas. But the second segment is called the East Central portion. And that one is about the same length. It runs 26 miles from Blinn to Port Angeles. And only about 2 miles of that one are unpaved. So that one's pretty complete. And definitely a very different experience here. It runs through prairie and riparian areas. There's some farm country, and then there's the city of Sequim. But some other highlights from that portion include Railroad Bridge Park. And I think one of the biggest things there, it features a 780-foot trestle bridge. There's a ton of things like that on this whole route, though. And then also in the park, there is the Dungeness Nature Center. There's a lot of wildlife around on the way. There's eagles, hawks, ravens, that sort of thing. We'll get into more wildlife later on. But then, of course, you have great views of the Olympic mountain range and coastal areas. So the path actually just follows the shore right before coming into Port Angeles there. And then the third segment is the West Central portion that runs 34.5 miles from Port Angeles to Highway 101, which is at Fairholm Hill. And that one crosses the Elwha River. Again, hope I'm saying that correctly, but on a very cool suspension bridge. And then you pass a lot of beaches and resorts. I believe that's the segment that I read. I didn't note this, but there's like 40 stream and river crossings, which is pretty mind-blowing as someone who lives in the desert. But some other highlights are Lake Crescent, which is a glacial lake that's kind of right between mountains. There's former railroad tunnels, a whole bunch of forest, and then Native American lands belonging to 3 tribes that I'm going to try to pronounce: the Sklallam, the Quileute, and the Coast Salish people. Please let me know if I butchered those or got them correctly down in the comments. But then the last section of the trail to talk about is the West End, which is a 43-mile segment that runs from Highway 101 to La Push, right on the coast. Again, lots of river crossings and more native lands, reservations, beaches, ocean views, and again, a ton of forests and mountains. So just beautiful scenery. I have only been in Washington briefly, but I have a feeling I would really like it there. Some other great sights along the way here. So you've got the chance to see deer. There's lighthouses. You can see whales, seals, otters, dolphins. You might see some Navy ships, and depending on your luck, you might even find Bigfoot. There's a lot of sightings out there. But anyway, info about e-bikes on this trail was a little bit hard to track down. One of the sources that I read said that Class 3 e-bikes were the only ones to be allowed, so no throttles and you're limited to 20 miles per hour, although that did seem to kind of be related to more of an offshoot called the Adventure Trail, which is a little bit more mountain bike related. But there are tons of bike and e-bike rental companies along the way. So, if you're not bringing your own bike and you want to do this trail, you can definitely get set up appropriately from them. So there's rental companies in Port Townsend, Sequim, and Port Angeles. But yeah, I think this place looks beautiful. I'd love to spend more time riding in areas like that. If you've been on it, let us know down in the comments how you liked it. And also let us know if you have anything that you ride regularly in your backyard that you'd like us to talk about on the show. You can let us know down in the comments or email us at questions@electricbikereport.com. All right, and now it's time for hopefully everyone's favorite segment of the show. This is where we get into questions and comments from the audience. So I'm going to start off with one from our Best Fat Tire e-bikes video on YouTube. This comes to us from Matt the Wish. I believe I'm saying that correctly. Why are some bikes not classed? Is that an issue? That's an excellent question, and if you're new to e-bikes, I hope this section is helpful. Let's just kind of run through the basic class definitions for anyone who's not familiar, and then I'll kind of address the question a little bit more directly. So most states, and this is something that is really governed on the state level, most states have adopted People for Bikes model legislation, which defines an e-bike as a bicycle with operable pedals, a seat or saddle, and an electric motor of less than 750 watts. And then those are broken down into 3 classes depending on their speed and how they're equipped. So Class 1 e-bikes offer pedal assist only, and that goes up to 20 miles per hour. Class 2 e-bikes offer pedal assist and throttle up to 20 miles per hour, and Class 3 e-bikes offer pedal assist up to 28 miles per hour. So in many cases, California aside, as we kind of touched on earlier, e-bikes can be multiple classes at the same time. So you can have a Class 2 e-bike with a throttle, and it can pedal up to 28 miles per hour. So it'd be Class 2 and 3 in that case. But then basically, to go back to the question, a bike that is not classed, or one that we say is unclassified, that just exceeds one or more of those limitations. So in the case of that video specifically, the Best Fat Tire e-bikes video, the unclassified bikes that we highlighted are generally just exceeding the 750 watt limitation on the motor power. And that's kind of a dicey subject as well, because we're talking about nominal, and most motors can peak higher than their nominal rating. Nominal just means like that's kind of what they're running on most of the time. So for example, the Mach-Wheel Obsidian there, or the Ride1Up Rev 1. So those bikes have 1,000 watt nominal motors, and that naturally just kind of makes them unclassified. But then many other bikes on that list, and other bikes that we've tested, ship with 750 watt nominal motors, but they can be unlocked to higher speeds, either at or above 28 miles per hour when pedaling, or their throttles can exceed 20 miles per hour. So those bikes would be considered classed when they arrive at your door if they are, shipping as Class 2s. But then if you unlock them at that point, they would be considered unclassified. And depending on where you live, they may or not be legal. So we always just recommend being aware of your local laws and adhering to those. But moving on to a question number 2, we have from last week's episode of the show from Papa D9067. He said, on another endless search I've undertaken in the world of e-bikes, LOL, I watch every episode of your videos and have yet to find an episode of recommended e-bike tires. As I mentioned, I have a Lectric Express. I've searched on Lectric's and other sites, not to mention Amazon/other channels. There's all types of aftermarket accessories, however, very few mentions of tires. In fact, Lectric doesn't have an option to purchase Express tires on their site. Does reviews e-bike tires on your channel? Hint, hint, hint. LOL, I would love to hear some recommendations. Thanks again, Dallas, aka Papa D. So thank you for the question and for contributing to multiple episodes of our show here. And that is a good question. We had a conversation around the office this morning about e-bike tires and just how that's something that sometimes even we don't think a whole lot about, but that is kind of a very important thing. So just kind of diving into the details on your question here. The Lectric Express has 27.5 inch by 2.1 inch Chaoyang Aerosun tires. Now, I couldn't find a ton of options out there that fit that specific size, so we'll kind of cover a few things to keep in mind when you're shopping for tires, and then I'll give you some recommendations on some potentially better options. So the first thing to be aware of is that sizing may be listed differently. Just depending on whether you're talking basically imperial or metric. There's a standard called ETRTO that gives widths in millimeters followed by the bead seat diameter in millimeters. So in this case, a tire that is 27.5 by 2.1 would be listed differently as 54-584. But then also you could kind of consider some slightly different sizing. There's also kind of the French method. So 650B, that's also 27.5 by 53 millimeters. That's kind of right about the 2.1 inch width. But then you know, could kind of go a little bit on either side. So you could look at 27.5 by 2 or 27.5 by 2.15. You should be able to upsize slightly. You might, depending on what you're looking at, you know, run into clearance issues. I feel like going up like 1/10 of an inch is not going to impact anything too much, but downsizing is probably a little bit safer. So the 27.5 by 2, that might be something to look at a little bit more. But then kind of dialing back to our experience with most e-bikes that we test, most do come with very similar entry-level tires. And, you know, a lot of brands like Chaoyang, Kenda, CST, and those are great. They're great to start. They usually you can get a lot of miles out of them, but there definitely are also better tires out there. Some of our favorite tire brands are Schwalbe, Continental, WTB, Maxxis, and Pirelli. Pirelli, that last one for me, that's probably my personal favorite, but Schwalbe, all of those brands make excellent tires. So some good options that you might want to consider based on that specific bike and that specific size. First to start is Schwalbe Big Bend tires. Those are just a really great standard commuter tire, and that one comes in 27.5 by 2 inch. You've also got the Schwalbe Hurricane. So that one's a little bit more of a hybrid tire. That's kind of another one of my personal favorites. It's got a nice smooth band down the middle for riding on paved surfaces, but then it has some chunkier shoulders just to give you the ability to ride on some like dirt or gravel trails. You've also got Panaracer Gravel King tires. Oh, sorry, the Hurricane were also 27.5 by 2 inch. But then, yeah, the Panaracer Gravel King tire, those are relatively smooth tires, so they're going to be efficient on paved surfaces, but then they have enough grip for some gravel riding as well. That's why they're called the Gravel King. But those come in 27.5 by 2.1, so that is right on with the sizing. And another similar sized tire, just exactly what you've got on the Express there, is the Specialized Kicker Sport. That is a knobbier tire that's kind of advertised for, bike park sort of thing. You could do some off-roading with that. Not going to be quite as fast rolling on paved surfaces. But then the Kenda Quick 7.5, so that's kind of in a similar tier to what the Express comes with. That's just, again, another very common tire that we see here, but they hold up well. Those are 27.5 by 2 inches. And then the last one I wanted to mention was the Maxxis Metro Loads tire. It's kind of specifically made for cargo bikes, but because of that, it's gonna hold up very well. It's made for paved roads, so it's got a relatively smooth pattern, and that one is 27.5 by 2.15. So yeah, a lot of information there. I hope that helps you. On that note, again, we were talking about things around the office this morning. This is a topic that we really want to dive into more. So we do have this on a list to, do a more dedicated video on this topic later on. So yeah, do keep an eye out for that coming soon. But then moving on to another question from the Lectric XP Lite 2.0 review. This is from Julie Miluski. I hope I said that right. She says, "Hi there, I got a Lectric XP Lite 2.0 and I love it, but I'm wondering if you could help me out with this problem I have. When riding in 1, I assume that's PAS 1, I have to work too hard, and when riding in 2, I'm mostly ghost pedaling. There are no gears. Is there a way to configure the settings so this doesn't happen? I'm a casual 57-year-old rider trying to get back into biking. Thank you." So good question. Yeah, definitely your experience is normal on that bike. So that is kind of a side effect of single speed e-bikes. There's a lot of considerations that brands really have to put into when designing single speed e-bikes, but the idea is to basically have a chain ring that is large enough so that you can kind of stay engaged with the pedaling at higher speeds, but also you don't want to have it too difficult to pedal uphill. The XP Lite 2.0 and really any other folding e-bike that has a single speed drivetrain is gonna have kind of an extra layer of difficulty there. And that really just kind of comes down to the folding frames. So in the XP Lite 2.0's case, There's a couple things that could potentially get in the way of changing the chainring size. So there's a sort of welded on U-shaped leg stand thing kind of below the middle of the frame that the bike rests on when it's folded. But then there's also a chain stay that kind of protrudes just above the chainring. You could look at maybe getting a slightly larger chainring, but you don't want the bike to end up resting on the chainring with that protruding kind of below that welded on stand once you have the bike folded. And then, even if you're not folding your bike, you still have the consideration of the chainstay on the top side. So I guess kind of my advice to you in general would just to kind of be relax into the ghost pedaling, kind of let the motor do the work. If that is bothersome to you, you might consider upgrading down the road. The Lectric XP4 that released earlier this year is not that much higher priced than the XP Lite 2.0. That is a fantastic e-bike. It's one of our most recommended and one of the most popular e-bikes on the market for right around $1,000. And it has just a lot of upgrades that I think you'd appreciate as well. So there's an 8-speed drivetrain there. You would not run into the ghost pedaling issue. It also has a torque sensor, so just a little bit more of an active and engaging ride there. But to round that all out, we do really like the XP Lite 2.0. It's one of the most affordable e-bikes that we recommend. It gives you a lot of bang for the buck, even though there are a couple potential trade-offs there. But anyway, next question here comes to us on the Aventon Level 3 review on YouTube that I did. That is from Kyle's31. How far is the range using only throttle? Okay, so yeah, that's a little bit of a tricky question to answer, just basically because we don't often test e-bikes in our range test using only their throttle. We really only do that with moto or moped style e-bikes. And even that is a relatively recent change. So I kind of looked at our data for those bikes that we have tested, and kind of regardless of the motor size or battery capacity, we really haven't seen any of those bikes exceed 30 miles of range using only their throttle. As a general rule of thumb, you can take our high power range test result and just kind of expect fewer miles than that because the motor is doing all the work instead of being sort of split with the rider. So in the case of the Level 3, we got 44 miles using its turbo mode there. So again, just expect less than that with the throttle. Just keep in mind that, pedaling is great. And even if you're using the highest level pedal assist, which makes pedaling very easy, you are going to do better than if you're only relying on throttle. But then our next question is from Little Piece of Heaven 65 on the Best for Seniors video on YouTube, who says, my issue is weight. I tore my shoulder and can't lift heavy anymore. I'm looking for lightweight that I can ride on paved, but also on partially gravel roads, under 2K. Help, please. Happy to help you out there. We just up front don't have a ton of options in this range, but I will give you a few, and really everything that we're going to be talking about here comes from the city e-bike category, which, tends to have a fairly sporty, forward-leaning, moderately aggressive riding position. Although there's, maybe an option here that we'll talk about that's not quite that aggressive. But these are the lightest bikes that we've tested that I think would kind of check your boxes. The number one thing, the lightest that I feel comfortable recommending here is the Fido Air. That was a bike that I reviewed very recently. That one is a carbon fiber e-bike that weighs only 33 pounds. It actually has a great feeling pedal assist system. It comes with a smartwatch. There's a whole bunch of cool features with that bike, but it does have a downside in that Fido, the brand that makes it, makes their bikes generally for the European market, and so it does have a speed limit that you typically find over there, which pedal assist only goes up to about 16 miles per hour. Now, you can get it up to 18 or so, I think, with some extra leg power, but the price is also great. It's $17.99. So as long as you don't mind that lower speed limit, I think that would be a good choice for you. Some other options, though, the Trek FX Plus 2. So that one is, of course, made by one of the largest bicycle and e-bike manufacturers in the world. It's on the lighter side for sure. We weighed it at 40 pounds. The range was a little bit limited there, so a little bit of a trade-off, but we really liked its overall feel. And that one is on a killer sale right now. You can pick that up for $15.99. That's about as cheap as you'll find for a Trek e-bike. But then another one is the 10Ways Seago 600 Pro. Now, that one is just super dialed in, responsive, and you've got a couple of different options there. So the lighter weight of the two options is a single-speed e-bike, which, again, you know, as a trade-off, some considerations that we talked about just a couple minutes ago. But that version of the bike weighs 42 pounds, and that one is priced the same as the Trek there at $15.99. There's also an 8-speed option that is a little bit heavier. That one goes up to about 45 pounds, and that one's a little less expensive actually. So that one's only right at $1,500. But then for something a little bit different, I wanted to talk about the V-Volt Alpha 2. So that one is sort of a hybrid city e-bike / cruiser. So it gives you a little bit more of a relaxed upright riding position, a little bit more relaxed handling, not as aggressive or performance oriented. That one is also a little bit on the heavier side at 45 pounds, but it is one of the cheapest bikes that I've seen in a minute. You can pick that one up for right around $1,200. But then just some other options to mention, things that are kind of our favorite e-bikes of this style, among, you know, the other ones that we talked about, but you might also consider the Ride1Up Roadster V3, the Velotric T1 ST Plus, and the Aventon Solterra 2.5. Those ones are all in the 44 to 45 pound range. And the Ride1Up Roadster V3 is just one of the best selling bikes of its kind on the market right now for very good reason. Fantastic bike. We like all of them, but that one just kind of has a special place in our hearts. So hopefully that gives you some options. Do let us know what you decide. If you decide to go with one of those and you get a chance to take it for a spin, let us know what you think. But then moving on to, I believe this is my last question of the day. Yes, this one comes to us from actually an old episode of the show, episode 20 of the Weekly Recharge, from Carvel13. New to e-bikes, so I'm watching and reading a lot of reviews. I know it can boil down to personal preference, but I've seen some people say even though the Velotric Discover 2 has a bigger motor, it's not as peppy as the Aventon Level 3, and that it's best in the boost level only. They also said it's heavier than advertised. I am looking for something comfortable to ride on paved roads and light trails. It's hard to pass up all the tech that comes with the Level 3, but some reviews say it's not as comfortable as the Discover's upright ride. It's hard to decide when you see conflicting info. Does the Discover 2 deliver on its motor and level options? And then is the Level 3 an uncomfortable ride due to the slight lean forward? So this is definitely one of the more complex questions. That's why I put it at the end here. But let's kind of start things off by talking a little bit about weight. So it's not uncommon for bikes to be heavier than advertised. We're not really sure why brands do this, but you know what you heard in that case is true. The Discover 2 is advertised to weigh 63 pounds, but we weighed it at 69.5 pounds. The Level 3 was definitely much closer to its advertised weight, though. That one was advertised to weigh 67, and we weighed ours at 67.5. But that is why we weigh our every test bike that we get in, so you can check out our written reviews. I usually mention it in the video reviews as well, but you can definitely see on our written reviews that we list the advertised weight and then what we actually weigh bikes at. But in any case, both of these bikes are pretty comparable. So as far as the actual comfort of the ride goes and the riding position, that really is going to depend on personal preference. The Level 3 does definitely have a little bit of a sportier feel, so you've got a little bit more of a forward position with weight on the handlebars, but just from personal experience, I actually have some wrist issues that can kind of interfere with my ability to ride some bikes. If I'm putting too much weight on the handlebars, sometimes my hand can go kind of numb, and yeah, I generally don't tend to stay on those kinds of bikes for any longer than I have to. But in the case of the Level 3, I really like that bike. I found it very comfortable. It didn't flare up any of my personal issues. So, that's at least some anecdotal evidence there that it's pretty comfortable. But then the Discover 2, that sort of upright riding position is just very well accepted as being the most comfortable, just because it's kind of like the most similar to sitting in a chair or on a bench or something like that. There is a bit of a trade-off, though, in that, if you're looking to ride on some trails, you have more relaxed steering. It's just a little bit less suited for off-roading. But then to talk a little bit more about pedal assist and the motor engagement. The level 3, in our opinion, is just a little bit more sensitive and a little bit more natural feeling, but it is very peppy. The motor is a little bit less powerful, which did come into play in our testing. We'll get into that here in a sec. But I think it's well-rounded overall. Now, the Discover 2 gives you a more powerful motor, but a wider range of power levels. There are actually 15 pedal assist settings. For those of you that aren't aware, those are kind of broken down into 3 riding modes. So you have Eco, Trail, and Boost. The power level in Eco mode is very light, so it very much feels similar to an analog bike. Boost mode on the high end gives you tons of power. It makes it very easy to pedal. And then Trail, you'd kind of expect that to be in the middle, but we found that it does skew a little bit more towards the lower end of the power, so a little bit more towards Eco than Boost. But again, plenty of options there. Our hill test, though, is just a really good indication of the differences in power. We really were surprised to see these bikes come in pretty close, but there are some noticeable differences. So the level 3 in our hill test, it had a throttle time up the hill of 1 minute and 54 seconds, and our test rider, Justin, was able to pedal up in 1 minute and 21 seconds. And then the Discover 2 had a throttle time of 1 minute 40, so that was about 14 seconds faster, and a pedal time of 1 minute and 17 seconds, so only about 4 seconds difference there. Which, we've found that the peak power output does kind of affect throttle times a little bit more, but programming is a factor there. So not a huge difference between the bikes, but depending on where you live and how hilly it is, you might value one or the other. But just to kind of round it out with some recommendations here, based on the fact that you said you really like the Level 3's tech and all the security features and everything, and that you want to do some off-roading and that you're concerned a little bit about weight, I do think I would probably steer you toward that bike. I think you might find it a little bit more appropriate. And then just something to keep in mind that if you find the riding position a little bit uncomfortable, you can always make some changes to the stem or the handlebars. I actually just had my bike into the shop and I saw a level 3 there that had like BMX style handlebars. So that made the riding position much more upright and very relaxed. It was actually a little bit closer to what the Aventon Pace 4 looks like, but even a little bit more relaxed than that. And so on that note, you might also consider the Pace 4. It's very similar to the level 3, but a little bit more relaxed. So and either way, whatever bike that you choose to go with, you might want to swap out the tires. Just to kind of tie back to what we started off talking about here today. Just probably want to look at something with like a knobbier or like a hybrid tread pattern to give you a little bit better grip if you are riding away from paved surfaces. But anyway, that does it for this section this week. If you want me or Griffin and I to answer any questions, feel free to let us know. You can comment on reviews either on YouTube or at the website. You can let us know down in the comment section below on this video, or you can email us at questions@electricbikereport.com. It's time for Deals of the Week. Deals of the Week. Hopefully I carried that okay. We talked a little bit earlier about the FX Plus 2, the city e-bike. So that one is right around $1,600 and that is $900 off. So again, a very good deal. And then another one of our favorites is the Elant Plus 8S. That is more of a full-size commuter e-bike. Lots of cool integrated tech and a nice Bosch mid-drive. That one is $2,000 off down to $2,500 and that's a great deal. So be sure to check those out. All right, it's time for Rider of the Week. I'm not going to keep up with that. But anyway, I got a good one this week. So this is Rider James from last week's episode of the show, who commented with some really cool information that I just wanted to bring up and share. We take this section to really highlight someone who's reached out to share their experience or what bike they're riding. In this case, just some really good info that I think will benefit a lot of folks. So we always just really appreciate all of you guys for writing in, and that's why we do this. But in any case, Rider James says, I like heavy duty tires and tubes, rim strips, tire liners, and slime or flat out. We had a section in the show last week where we were talking about flat prevention, but most don't seem to be aware that AAA offers bicycle roadside assistance, and it's included for free with your AAA membership. And he pulled from AAA's website, what to do if you have a flat or bike issue. Whether you're on the road in a car or on a bicycle, roadside assistance coverage provides peace of mind. If your bike gets a flat or becomes inoperable, AAA Bicycle Service is available to help at no extra cost to members. While AAA tow drivers can't repair bikes, they will pick you and your bike up and take you wherever you need to go, your car, a bike repair shop, or even home. Coverage distance depends on your membership level, and service is only provided for the rider whose bike is inoperable. But this benefit applies to traditional bikes, e-bikes, rented bikes, and even bike trailers, as long as the trailer can be safely transported. So yeah, a lot of cool info there. I do not personally have a AAA subscription, but my parents always did when I was growing up, and I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there who still do. So if that is you, take some comfort in knowing that they have your back when it comes to e-bikes. But again, we really like talking about all of you guys. So if you want to be highlighted on this section of the show, please email us at questions@electricbikereport.com, or you can let us know down in the comment section. And we thank you. If you're still hanging out with me, thanks for sticking around. I really enjoyed this little bit more intimate get together with you guys and chatting about some cool stuff. So do please join us next week as we celebrate reaching 100,000 subscribers. Again, that is just a gigantic milestone for the company and the channel here. Really looking forward to sharing that time with Griffin. But hopefully you got some good information out of this episode. You can reach us directly through many of the channels that I've talked about. We are always happy to interact and respond to you, but you can also find this show on all of your favorite podcast channels. But be sure to reach out, let us know, interact with us, give this video a like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff. But until next time, happy riding, and I'll see you on the trails. Again, I'm John with Electric Bike Report, and this was the Weekly Recharge.